Morning everyone, my name's Tom Ellert von Brasch and I work for the Norwegian Mapping Authority, Kartverket. As you can see from the title, today's presentation is going to be on Inspire View Services, and we're really talking about WMS services here, not the cache services. So first off, I wonder if anyone can spot the mistake in the title there. FOSS4G compliancy comparison. Now, the word compliancy has been thrown around for the last few years when it comes to software and services. But it's important we understand, can the software be compliant? There's no abstract test suites, there's no comparison classes, so can the software be compliant to anything? Does it have anything to be compliant to? So we'll take a little look at that today, and we'll also, as the title suggests, take a look at open source software and the solutions available to people for their view services. So the rules and regulations, the implementing rules, the technical guidance documents we'll take a look at, the FOSS4G software comparison, but of course it's not an open source conference, an Inspire conference, so we'll take a little look at a couple of proprietary options out there as well for you, and then sum it up with a few conclusions. So the implementing rules and the technical guidance documents. Not sure how familiar everyone is with these. I'm sure they will have seen some of them in some format or other. But it's important to know what we need to provide and what is wished that we provide. First of all, the implementing rules. Do we need to meet their requirements? Yeah, we do, because they're legally mandated. This is really what we need to look at when we talk about what we need to provide, what we need to meet. It's the implementing rules we're talking about. The technical guidance documents, maybe. They've got a lot of requirements in them and recommendations. Requirements is maybe slightly misleading, but those are not legally mandated. You can choose to follow the guidance documents or not. It's up to you. So, a couple of slides of text, I'm afraid. Just wanted to go through the implementing rules, really. These are the European Commission regulations. This is sort of the granddaddy of Inspire, really, this 2007/2/EC directive. Catchy name. This is the one that set out what we had to provide for Inspire, really. Article 11, that's the one that talks about network services. It's the one that talks about download, view, transformation, etc. You can see there, B, this is really the crucial bit. View services making it possible as a minimum to display, navigate, zoom in, out, pan, overlay, viewable spatial data sets. Not too tricky. Any standard WMS software is going to provide that kind of functionality. And at the time, this was all you needed to provide. Nice and simple. However, I added a kicker in Article 16 saying that it left space for extra technical requirements at a later stage. And that's where we come on to this regulation, number 976/2009. Names are just getting more interesting at this point. And here you have a few annexes that set out real technical requirements. The first, Annex 1, sets out performance, capacity and availability. This is what we know as the quality of service requirements. The speed of the service, how many requests it can handle, and the uptime. Not going to concentrate on those too much because the software is obviously important here, but the whole infrastructure plays a role in the quality of service requirements. So we'll skip ahead. The other technical requirements, they kind of nod to the WMS 111 and 130 specification with the get map request and the get service metadata requests. So fairly kind of standard stuff. The only annex really that brought in something new is this Annex 3, which talked about the language requirements and parameters. You can see here it says 2 language parameters shall be provided. It's really looking for a default natural language parameter and a supported language parameter as well. Now, it doesn't say you need to have multi-languages. It's completely up to you. You can serve your services out in one language or in many, but you need to have the facility and the parameters to meet the supported languages. So that's the kind of technical, or the documentation over and done with. So I'll move on to the actual project we started last year for the FOSS conference and worked on a little bit this year as well. what we wanted to do is create 3 view services and really test them against the implementing rules and the technical guidance documents, just how many of the requirements can they meet. So we looked at Mapserver, Deegree and Geoserver. Those are the 3 main players really in the open source software world. Of course there are other open source software vendors out there, but I'm not aware of any that have really put a lot of effort into meeting the Inspire requirements. So we concentrated on these. We tried to make WMS 130 services. We were really aiming to meet the highest recommendations from the technical guidance document that we could. And as you can see, we tested them against the implementing rules and the tech guidance document. And we looked, and they either did pretty well or they didn't do so well. So how did we do it? The 3 Inspire WMS services we created, we were based on Inspire compliant data, hydrography data. The setup of the 3 software, Mapserver running through Apache on Linux and using a PostGIS backend. Geoserver on Apache Tomcat and Windows Server 2003, again PostGIS backend, and finally Deegree, again through Apache Tomcat but on a Ubuntu virtual box running off PostGIS again. So that was the setup, pretty standard, pretty simple. The actual versions of the software, the latest test we did were on Mapserver 6.03, Deegree 3.1 with the Inspire Workspace module, and Geoserver 2.2 beta. The data involved, you could have I actually did a presentation yesterday on the processes involved in this, but essentially we took Norwegian hydrographic data and put that into an Inspire kind of format database, near enough as we could get it. But we chose just 3 layers to serve out in the services, land water boundaries, water bodies and man-made objects. 2 of those layers, they're pretty standard layers, single feature types, etc. The water bodies layer is slightly different. That's what's called a container or category layer. There you've got 2 individual feature types within it, which can provide a few problems for software. So that was the setup. The 73 requirements in the technical guidance document for the WMS section at least, and that's what we would be looking at to see how many of those the service could actually meet. As I've already said, you don't really have to meet these requirements, but ideally that's what we're all, I hope at least, looking to do. To test the software, we used a couple of online services and software suites. One from Neo Geo Technologies and the German GDID test suite. The German test suite, that's in its, I believe, still in its pilot phase at the moment, but it's still got a very good online interface and a very comprehensive report comes back to you. So it's just an option if you want to do any bespoke kind of Inspire view service validation. You can just pop your URLs into here and get a nice report back. So the results. I could have put up a table here with all the 73 requirements and the implementing rule requirements, but horribly boring, you wouldn't be able to read it. So I've concentrated on the failures, if you like. I originally wrote this presentation for the FOSS4G conference last year, and at that point I had 4 or 5 tables of failures or requirements that the services weren't meeting, but now we're just down to a couple of tables. And I shouldn't really use the word failures. They're not failures, it's just requirements that aren't met. The first is looking at the scenario 1 and scenario 2 options. Inspire states that when it comes to service metadata, you can either store most of it in a catalog and link to it through a URL, a metadata URL, in the service capability document, or you can have all of the metadata information chucked out on the fly into the capabilities document. And that's including the Inspire extended capabilities as well. So you can see here Mapserver, Geoserver and Deegree, they all meet scenario 1, so that's great. Scenario 2, just Mapserver and Deegree meet those. Geoserver hasn't put in the work yet to do that. But as I've said, it's not absolutely essential, of course. The other area where we have problems is with multilingual capabilities. I'll start with Degree, that's the clearest. They do technically have the possibility for multilingual responses. You can have multi endpoints, so you can store your metadata in several different files and have different languages. The only problem is what they don't meet is this language equals KVP, and they get capabilities request. They have no way of interpreting that, so technically they don't meet these requirements. But I've talked to Marcus Schneider, one of the lead developers there, and he says it's definitely possible. So if you're a country that wants to use Deegree and needs multilingual capabilities, just talk to Marcus. I'm sure you can work something out. Geoserver? Yeah, I'm not too sure. I tried to get this working, and I must admit I couldn't. I've read documentation that says that it does support the language equal KVP, and you can get multilingual responses back. But as I said, I didn't quite manage, so I'm not 100% sure on that. So you should check with the Geoserver community. Mapserver, however, does completely support the language equals KVP and completely supports multilinguality. So we move on. So as you can see, Mapserver is really the only software that fully, I've used the word comply again, which I should really cross out completely. It meets the requirements of Scenario 1 and Scenario 2, and it meets all the multilingual requirements. In fact, it's the only software that does, actually, as far as I can see, meet all the implementing rules and technical guidance requirements. Geoserver has a problem with the multilingual issue, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. But it definitely doesn't support Scenario 2. That may be an issue for some countries, it may be not. Deegree, all it's missing is the support there of the language equals parameter. So I think it's safe to say that in the open source world, there's very good support. The amount of work done in the last 6 months on these software has been really, really impressive, I think. And I think they now offer a great variation and variety of software and platforms on which to really provide excellent view services that we can all move forward with. I've said it's not an open source conference this time, so I'll talk a little bit about a couple of proprietary options. Of course, we have Esri. I haven't actually been able to test these software, Esri, and the other one is Geomedia Intergraph. But I've tried to read the documentation, looked at the webinars, etc. And it seems Esri say they completely fulfill the technical requirements, so that would be the implementing rules as well, on view services and download services. Just picture the kind of infrastructure you're looking at. It's ArcGIS for server would be the view service software you'd be looking for. But of course they have a number of products that all mash together if you're looking for a complete kind of Inspire solution. And just a link there to their Inspire information. They do have quite a lot of technical stuff on Inspire, so it's a good place to go. They tell you what you need and what you can get. And of course it can be a good solution, especially for maybe the Annex 3 kind of data and organizations where you're serving up maybe smaller data sets. You don't need quite as many licenses, and the financial burden's not quite as much. Then, of course, with the support, it's a good option. Intergraph is another company that's done a lot of work for the Inspire specifications. Their Geomedia suite with SDI Pro. That, again, they say meets the Inspire directives and implementing rules, and it's compliant to ISO and OGC, which, of course, is always nice. So it's the SDI Pro, that's the view service software, and SDI Portal, that's another bit of software that can help you build up your Inspire infrastructure. Finally, a few conclusions. Options out there are good. As I've already said, you've got open source options, proprietary options. A lot more knowledge out there now than there was, say, 6 months ago, which is great. You can always ask a question on the mailing list, etc., and you're pretty much guaranteed to get a decent answer. So certainly the tools are out there now to make these view services. Of course, all we're lacking really is the harmonized data in a lot of cases, which is a bit of a shame. Multilinguality can still be an issue in some of the software. It's obviously a bit of a tough one, but again, as I say, you don't have to provide anything in many languages. You can just provide one if you want. You only need to meet the implementing rules requirements. This is important. If people say, you must meet the technical guidance requirements, It's not true. They're there as guidance only. They're not legally mandated. But of course, I hope and I pray that everyone here and who's making these services will really aim as high as possible, just to try and aid interoperability and the best harmonization of these services we can get. And of course, now the focus shifts to download services. View services have been out for a while. Download services are supposed to be coming out this year. So I hope I can come back next year with a talk on download services software. And that's in the presentation. Thank you.